It is March 11th, 2026. Spring training is underway for a lot of different teams across Major League Baseball. We're about a little over halfway through spring training. Regular season is coming up for the game of baseball. And you are starting to get a little bit of a picture and an insight into results, into spring training action. And you have, for the past, 3 weeks or so, had the opportunity to be able to watch the Los Angeles Dodgers in action for spring training. It has been awesome to be able to watch and experience the Dodgers back in action. The defending back-to-back World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers are in play. And really, with spring training results, or at least with battles that come through spring training, there aren't a whole lot for the Los Angeles Dodgers. You have only a couple of different areas that you could point to. You can look at the bullpen. There's a couple of different spots with the bullpen with a lot of different guys, but there's going to be a lot of ins and outs for that particular role. You could also look potentially at the starting pitching portion, in which Roki Sasaki is part of a main portion of that. But really, there's a couple of different guys, and especially with pitching, there's going to be a lot of ins and outs with a lot of different pitching that comes throughout the season. Then you have a lot of the offensive side of things, and particularly with second base, where there's a lot of competition and battle, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be determined by that, as well as the outfield. There are certain battles, not as many as many other Major League Baseball teams, but there are certain battles that the Los Angeles Dodgers are having throughout spring training to determine specific roster spots for this team. And typically, what we want to do as fans of the Los Angeles Dodgers, as well as the Dodgers as an organization, wants to be able to look at these individual players, especially in which there is battles for specific roster spots, and make a determination who has earned a roster spot for opening day, knowing that it might not be a long-term thing, but they want to form the best possible team or the most deserving team they possibly can for the start of spring, for the start of the regular season. That is what spring training battles are determined to be for. And typically what we do when we're looking at analyzing spring training results is we look at what the actual results on the field are. And this is a common approach because this is the tactic that we use throughout the regular season to be able to determine how well an individual player is doing. We look at the box score, we look at what the stat line is to be able to see how individual players are doing. So for example, you could go to MajorLeagueBaseball.com for the Los Angeles Dodgers. You can sort this by different at-bats and look to see how well an individual player is doing. So, for example, Zach Earhart is batting .306, .390 on base percentage, .500 slugging. That's an .890 OPS. You could say that is really good for Zach Earhart. And certainly with the on-field results that we are seeing for him, that is really good as well. You can also look at a player like a Ryan Ward, who we've been a big advocates for in the past. Really struggled in spring training with the actual results. 156 batting average, 182 on base, 219 slugging, 401 OPS. Has not been good on the field results for Ryan Ward. You can look at this. You can even go to what I often like to do and use Fangraphs for this and get a little bit more of WRC+. So perhaps OPS, perhaps batting average are not your favorite thing, as they aren't my exact favorite thing, or at least I prefer WRC+ as a metric to use. You can look at Zach Earhart, 134 WRC+, Alex Freeland, 71 WRC+, Nick Senzel, 196 WRC+, and look at some of these different players and be able to make an evaluation on there. And I think for the most part, and we're going to focus primarily on position player wise today, because I think this is where I see some very fundamental questions for us to be able to ask when we're doing this evaluation. Typically, that is where the extent of our evaluation for spring training comes, is we look at the box score, we look at the actual spring training results, we see what a person is hitting. You see on Sportsnet LA, you see somebody is hitting 3 for 20. And you make it a determination of that player is that good because he hit this during spring training, or this player has earned it because of this is what the box score actual results say. Are we misinterpreting spring training results, or rather, are we getting an incomplete picture of how good players are just based off of that evaluation, or based on just what the eye test is telling us? I believe we are getting an incomplete picture, and there are underlying metrics that we can use who, despite the small sample size of spring training, can help to give us a little bit of a better insight into who is actually performing well with spring training, what are some areas in which particular players need to work on, rather than just looking at Fangraphs, looking at MLB.com, looking at wherever, and seeing what the actual results are in the game. I think there are better measures that we can use, and I'm going to showcase what I think some of those better measures, to not say that we look solely at those measures, but provide a more complete, comprehensive look into spring training results to give you guys the best possible picture you can of who actually or could actually deserve spring training or a spot with the Los Angeles Dodgers based on spring training. That is what we're going to dive into today. My name is Austin Brubaker. I'm privileged to be your host this evening. Casey is off tonight. He's got some stuff that he's got to go ahead and take care of, so I'm going to be doing the show today. Works out well. There is not a Dodgers game that is going on. Typically, when there is a Dodgers game, Dodgers Daily will not go on and interfere with that game. We're going to work on what the schedule is going to be for the next couple of days, because there's a couple of evening games that are happening the next 2 days, which is when we potentially could be available to do a show. We'll try to keep you informed with that. Where I want to be able to go with this, first off, a couple things about this show. This show is going to be very data heavy, very analytically driven. If you're into that, great. If you're not necessarily into a lot of the numbers, this might not be the greatest show for you, but I still encourage you to be able to hear a lot of these different arguments. Second off, I think we need to be able to, I'm going to be explaining a lot of different statistics, and I'm going to be doing a deep dive as if you are a little bit newer to the baseball side of things and that specific statistic. So there might be stuff that I'm repeating myself that is intentional, that is to bring in as wide of an audience as I possibly can to be able to go ahead and dive into a lot of these numbers with you. First off, to go ahead and get started, let's start with a little bit of a breakdown of spring training statistics, where they could be relevant, and what are some of the problems with spring training actual results. First off, the thing that you're going to hear a lot about with spring training is a very small sample size. What you have with baseball, and this is especially true with baseball, because with baseball, you have 162 games. You have 162 games to be able to evaluate how good a player actually is, which means you get a lot of stretches where players are good and some stretches where there's some cold streaks. And we've seen a lot of different hot streaks and cold streaks. Andy Pages obviously went through a very cold streak during the postseason, but that does not undermine what he did during the regular season through 162, which is why the Dodgers still believe in him. They don't just look at a 15-game sample and make a determination of how good he is. Rather, they look at a bigger picture. With spring training, you do not have the luxury of 162 games. Rather, you have a much smaller sample size to be able to look at. Another problem with spring training statistics is there is a lot of variability in different pitchers that are being thrown at you. There is a mixture of major league and minor league players that are pitching through those games. It's super obvious when you go out and watch a lot of the major league guys starting within the first couple of innings. Then once you get to the later innings, you're going to see a lot of guys from the minor league side. The players that are hitting do not have a choice as to which type of players that they go ahead and face. They can get in there earlier in the games, which is typically when the Dodgers like to play some of the guys that they're thinking about who could potentially make the major league roster or could soon enough make it onto the major league roster. They want them to face more of the higher competition type of arms before cycling in some of the guys that are from the minor leagues, which is super exciting to see those guys get opportunities. But from a practicality basis, there is a little bit of a bias that is put into some of these results because there's a variability of different types and levels of pitchers that you are facing. There is a little bit of that at the major league level, meaning there's some times when you're going to go ahead and face Tarek Skubal. There's also going to be some times when you just need a guy that's going to be perhaps a DFA guy that you're going to go ahead and face. But there's less variability on the major league side of things than there is at the minor league side of things, where they have to be able to throw in some of these younger guys, some of the minor league guys, to be able to get them adequated. Or perhaps a major league pitcher did not go as long as they had wanted or hoped to, so they have to put in somebody else to be able to throw into the mix. players do not have the ability to increase their sample size to a large degree to get a full picture of how good the results are. Neither do players get the opportunity to be able to pick and choose exactly who they are facing in the results. So that becomes a question of how much can we look into the actual results of spring training. And I think it is a totally fair question to be able to ask about what validity do you put into any of the spring training results given those specific questions. And I think it comes down to a very specific type of person that you are looking to be able to look deeper into some of the spring training results, or perhaps you look at very specific type of spring training results rather than just the overall big picture what's going on, or use a lot of that different information at the same time. When you're looking at the specific type of player that you are looking for to be able to evaluate what the spring training results are, I think it is some of those younger guys. I think it is some of the guys that are fighting for roster spots, fighting for different opportunities, or maybe some of the veteran guys that are looking to prove themselves and try to fight a way onto the roster. That's when they are going to be highlighted quite a bit. And we've seen that on the roster with guys like an Alex Freeland, with guys like a Santiago Espinal, a Nick Senzel, has gotten pretty heavy workload throughout the spring because the Dodgers want to be able to give a little bit of an inside look to see exactly how well they are doing throughout the course of spring. Those guys, their results or how they are doing is highlighted. But it's not just the on-field results that are highlighted. There are specific aspects in each person's game that you want to be able to evaluate to see how good they are doing, or perhaps how well they are actually improving from the previous year. Meaning there are certain areas in which a player, you want to see him develop and work on certain skill sets. For example, Dalton Rushing. Dalton Rushing came up to the big leagues, super high prospect, came with a high degree of pedigree. He swung and missed way too much at the major league level last year. One of the things that you want to be able to evaluate with Dalton Rushing is how is the swing and miss doing in his game. Eliminate some of the noise with some of the numbers and be able to determine what the swing and miss actually is with Dalton Rushing. That's going to be a pretty heavy determinant in what you look for a lot of these different guys. So when we're looking at spring training results, understanding very small sample size, but there are ways in which you can look at a little bit of a larger sample size within some of the data as well. Understand that aspect. Also understand some of the nature of baseball statistics. So, for example, if we go back to this spreadsheet right here, which is the Fangraphs type of spreadsheet, every single one of these results that you see right here is determined and based on what the on-field result actually is. Meaning, for example, let's take a player, let's say Ryan Ward, even though Ryan Ward has definitely struggled, and we'll get into some of the numbers with him in just a little bit. He definitely has struggled throughout the spring. But let's say, for example, with some of his numbers that he had right here, a 401 OPS, a 156 at batting average, 182 on base percentage, 219 slugging. All of that is based on what happened on the field, based on what he did on the field, which means it does not matter in these specific results that you see with spring training, whether he is hitting 110 mile per hour line drives that are getting caught, or whether he's getting singles on 60 mile per hour dribblers in the infield that find the right spot. That plays no role in any of these specific stats. This rather is looking at what the actual results are. So if, let's say, Ryan Ward was hitting the ball incredibly hard, but he was getting out quite a bit, and a lot of things you could say were bad luck, that would not be determined by what these results actually are, which means that the results that we're looking at right here provide a little bit of an incomplete picture, which means that we need to be able to look at other statistics to be able to help draw a little bit more of a comprehensive conclusion into what's exactly happening with some of these results. And I think that's where we as baseball community can do a better job in looking at some of these results. I think there's a couple of different tendencies that we have as a baseball community. I'm speaking for myself. First, and then you can look at this through a wider lens of how we actually evaluate baseball results. Is we often there's a couple of different things that we can do. We can either say spring training results don't matter, which to certain players, I think that absolutely is true. I'm not concerned at all what Shohei Ohtani, what Mookie Betts, what a Kyle Tucker, what a Freddie Freeman do in spring training, because I have a large history of them being able to succeed at the major league level. Where I think it can become impactful is for some of the younger guys that need to come up through the big leagues and be able to perform. Those guys, I think some of the results actually do matter a little bit. So we can say the results don't technically matter, games don't technically count, there's too much variability with some of the pitchers that come in, it's too small of a sample size, let's just throw all of that out. Which I think you can not base everything on spring training results, but there is some interpretation that you can have from some of the spring training results to be able to pull. And I think so there's one tendency to say, let's just throw away everything. The other tendency is, let's just look at what these results are. Let's look at what the box score actual results are, and let's finish it. Let's stop right there. And I think both methods provide an inaccurate, incomplete picture into what the player is actually able to do. And when you dive a little bit deeper, there are some of these numbers where it's going to look a little bit to sometimes dramatically different than what the on-field results are. And I think this is important because when we're evaluating baseball players in the regular season, we do not just look at these specific numbers. These specific numbers are useful. These specific numbers are great, but they don't tell us everything. We look at some things, underlying metrics. We look at stuff like expected batting average, expected slugging, expected weighted on base average. We look at stuff like swing decisions. We look at stuff like what are some of the underlying metrics that could help predict what's going to happen in the future. And that ultimately should be the goal with spring training, is to be able to do an evaluation of your players and say, I believe this player should make the team because I predict that this player is going to have the biggest impact on the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2026. And that it takes a combination of previous season's results and some of the things, perhaps some of the advancements that they are making in spring training that you're seeing with some of the underlying data. So that begs into question, what type of underlying data should we be looking at for each one of these players? Or what is my argument for some of the underlying data that we should look at? We're going to go ahead and be diving into that. First off, I do have an Excel spreadsheet for you guys. It is available in both the description of this video as well as in the chat. This is open. This is public for you guys. I have collected all of this information publicly, been able to sort a lot of different information. It provides great insight for you guys to be able to go over. Please take advantage of it. It will also be updated as best as I can daily to be able to go through and talk through each one of these aspects, so then you can go ahead and see all the different numbers. So what are we going to look at for each one of these players? The first aspect I want to look at is swing decisions. And I went over this on my previous show that I did, it's been a week and a half or so ago, when I was talking a little bit about who's winning some of the early battles coming over for spring training. But I think it's important, and I want to be able to go over this with you and provide you guys with a little bit of an update of what is going on with spring training. First off, if you go into the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet that is in the description and in the link to this video, you're going to see a lot of different tabs right here. We're going to be going through each one of these, talking about different aspects of each player. I'll try to zoom in as best as I possibly can. First off, we have on the column, we have a whole bunch of different players that I find most interesting to be able to evaluate some of their spring training results and be able to take a look from there. In addition, I also have league average results. These league average results come from the entirety of the 2025 regular season. This is to provide you guys with a little bit of a comparison basis to be able to evaluate. Also, if you see stuff that's in red, red is good, blue is bad. made it as simple as you possibly can. It's based on what some of the figures of Baseball Savant are. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to explain what each of these numbers are, explain what is good, what is bad, and then let's take a little bit of a deep dive into some of these, and then we'll break it down even further because this aspect goes deep, but it doesn't go deep enough. The reason why I want to be able to do it on a swing decision basis is because with spring training results, one of the issues that we've addressed is there's a small sample size. There is right now probably between 20 and maybe 40 at 40 plate appearances that players are getting for some of the Dodgers that are getting higher looks. That doesn't provide you with a whole lot of insight into how well they're doing. For example, you could go on a 2-game stretch in which you absolutely go off and then strike out the rest of the time, but some of your results are actually pretty good because of that 2-game stretch, because you had 6 really good plate appearances, then you're 6 for 20, and then your overall results start to look pretty good, even though there's been perhaps a lot of struggle that you have. With this looks at a per pitch basis, which takes our sample size from about 20 to 40 to potentially to about 100 to 160. That's a little bit better to be able to do. And also this shows you what some of the approach that each one of these players is taking as part of their game and how they are using that approach to be able to have success at the big league level. So a couple of different things. First off, we're going to go ahead and talk about this statistic right here, zone percentage. Zone percentage is what percentage of pitches are inside the strike zone. Then you have swing percentage. What percentage of pitches do you actually swing at? This includes pitches inside the zone and outside the zone. Then you have zone swing percentage. Inside the box, what percentage of those do you actually swing at from inside the zone? You want this number to be relatively high. Out of zone swing percentage, this is the amount of pitches that you swing outside the strike zone. You want this to be as low as you possibly can be. Out of zone swing percentage, because swinging at balls is not going to have good results. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Then we have contact percentage. What percentage of pitches do you actually make contact on? Zone contact percentage and out of zone contact percentage. Obviously, the higher your contact percentage is, the less you are likely to be able to strike out, especially if you're not chasing outside the zone as much. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So these are the league average numbers from 2025 with all of these different numbers at the major league level, just so you can provide some sort of baseline numbers to compare players to. And where we're going to start off, and this is going to be a name that I'm going to bring up quite a bit, is Alex Freeland. First off, I want to provide a little bit of a clarification. I do not personally know Alex Freeland. He, however, I think represents this philosophical question to an extreme degree that I think is so fundamentally important, especially with spring training results in mind. And I think it is so fascinating what he is doing this spring that I have to be able to talk about it, especially because I do not see many other people talking about it until I've been able to bring up a lot of his numbers. Because if you look at the surface numbers of what Alex Freeland has been able to do, it's 574, 573 OPS, and a 71 WRC plus. For a player that had a 73 WRC plus during the 2025 season, in which he had 97, I believe, plate appearances with the Los Angeles Dodgers, that does not inspire a whole lot of confidence, a 574 OPS. Where or what do the underlying metrics say about Alex Freeland in particular is where I want to go ahead and start off this. Then we'll get into some of the other players and we'll make a comparison to what you're seeing perhaps with Alex Freeland. First off, which is some of the things that you want to see? 2025 statistics at the major league level are on the top row. 2026 for spring training is on this one. And here's the change over time as well right here. So what you're seeing is he's actually had a drop in what his OPS was from 2025 to spring training this year. He saw 429 pitches in 2025, 164 in spring training, which means that you're starting to get a little bit more of a comparable results when you go on a per pitch basis. Couple of things that stand out to you is there are some very noticeable, drastic changes to what Alex Freeland had at the regular season last year and what we are seeing for him in spring training. First off, I'm going to go to his contact percentage. And the reason why I'm going to his contact percentage, Alex Freeland had a 36% strikeout percentage in 2025. That was far too high. He is not going to be a successful big leaguer if he is anywhere near 36% strikeout percentage, because he does not have the impact of the baseball that is needed to be able to offset a 36% strikeout percentage. He needs to boost up his contact percentage. What has he done this spring training? He has gone from a 72% contact percentage to, in spring training, which I know is flawed results, about 88%. That is an increase of 15.5% in his contact percentage. You look at out of zone contact percentage, which we'll get into that number, that's gone up quite a bit. But where it's key, and this is where we need to have a lot of success, is in zone contact percentage. It's at 88.6% this spring training, up 11% than what it was during the regular season. Which means that you're seeing an Alex Freeland make a significant gain in his contact percentage in spring training, underlying metrics and what you are seeing that are not reflected in the overall OPS that you are seeing. Now, what is one of the criticisms that you hear about Alex Freeland all the time? He doesn't swing the bat at all. We'll get into that in just a second with the next tab that I have, because this is utterly fascinating what we're going to be looking at with that. And certainly, his swing percentage actually has gone down in spring training. It's gotten to a 30% swing percentage. But where is he taking away some of the swings is what is fascinating, because last year at the regular season, he had a 17.5% out of zone swing percentage. That was well below league average at 31.5%. It is down to less than 6% in spring training, swinging at pitches outside of the zone, which, to provide some context for this, of the last 5 years in Major League Baseball, there has not been a single player with, I believe it's 150 plate appearances. Don't quote me on the actual results. There has not been a single player at the Major League level with an out-of-zone swing percentage with 150 plate appearances less than 15%. Alex Freeland in spring training, small sample size, only 164 pitches, has that at 5.5%, which is beyond elite. We'll get into additional numbers in just a little bit. His zone swing percentage actually has gone up a little bit. It's up 3.5% than what it was last year. Still really low, still lower than what it is at the major league level. Major league average is about 63.5%. His is about 57 at this point. But what you're seeing with Alex Freeland so far, with swing decisions, is better overall contact. You're seeing less swing and miss for Alex Freeland, and you're seeing better swing decisions, even if there's not as much swing as perhaps you would want inside of the zone. Let's compare that to some of the other players, and obviously the player that he's going to be compared to, which it's not a complete fair comparison because you are only taking about a weak sample size of Ha-Seong Kim. But if you were to talk about what are some of the things that both Freeland and Kim need to work on, both of them had the exact same thing that they needed to work on. Strikeout percentage. Strikeout percentage way too high for Alex Freeland. Strikeout percentage way too high for Kim. 36 for Freeland, about 30.5% for Ha-Seong Kim. And Ha-Seong Kim's only 54 pitches. Very, very small sample size to be able to look at. What you are seeing is a very different approach. Instead of swinging less, Ha-Seong Kim is swinging more. And it doesn't include as much out-of-zone swing percentage, although his out-of-zone swing percentage is still above league average. It's a lot more pitches inside of the zone. He took his in-zone swing percentage and boosted it up to 81%. Where are some of the concerning aspects with Ha-Seong Kim, though, in his very brief appearance, and I'm going to keep repeating, very brief appearance in spring training? His contact percentage is still sitting at about 68% for him, actually below than what it was last year. In-zone contact, about the same. Out-of-zone contact, which he does swing above average at 36%, was only at 40%. Which means a lot of the swing decisions for Ha-Seong Kim weren't necessarily great, and there's some underlying metrics, especially if your determination is, I want a player that's go ahead and work on this one specific aspect, lowering your strikeout percentage. Ha-Seong Kim, during his brief appearance, did not show great signs for that, which could be masked by his 1.154 OPS in his 13 plate appearances that he had. Again, incredibly small sample size. I don't want to draw too many inclusions for Kim just because it's a little bit of an unfair comparison. Let's look at a couple of other different players, and we're going to focus primarily on the change in some of their numbers right here. Santiago Espinal, it's one of the highlights of spring training because he's been phenomenal. 1.326 OPS in spring training this year. He's been unbelievable and has earned a spot onto this roster. Where he's having a lot of success, though, is actually really weird. We'll get into that in a little bit. Zone for swing percentage up pretty big for Santiago Espinal, swinging a little bit more, and what you'll notice, he's impacting the baseball quite a bit. Nick Senzel, who was in the Dodgers minor league system last year, didn't necessarily have a ton of success. It was around a 90 WRC plus for Nick Senzel in Oklahoma City. He's swinging a lot less. He's actually not getting a whole lot of pitches that he's going to go ahead and hit. Again, in-zone swing percentage, not super high for him. Not making a ton of contact, but one of the things you're going to notice about Senzel is he's smashing against left-handed pitching. Here's some of the other numbers. You got Miguel Rojas. You can see out-of-zone swing percentage pretty up for Miguel Rojas. Not great swing decisions, especially the most recent game. A lot of pitches outside the zone. He was swinging at everything with that. Could be just part of his process that he had. Let's go to Dalton Rushing right here. Because he's another player to be able to watch this spring training. The overall results don't look spectacular. You're looking at a player that in spring has a 68 WRC plus, up from what his 62 is. But there's some better metrics than what you can have. Contact percentage is up a little bit, although it is still well below league average at about 71.5%. A little bit more contact on pitches outside of the zone. What Rushing has done well, though, is the impact that he has on the baseball. These are some other numbers that you can see. Michael Ciani, there's numbers for Alex Call. Really, with a lot of these numbers, and these are numbers that don't really have any type of comparison. So some of the prospects, Earhart, Tibbs, Miller, Hope, and DePaula, not really comparison right there, is there hasn't been a whole massive, huge increase. Andy Pages is swinging the bat a lot less in spring training, which is interesting to be able to see that. But the one player that really stands out in this metric, you perhaps could look at Ryan Fitzgerald with some of his numbers right there. But from my vantage point, a player that really stands out with these numbers, especially with a lot of consistency in play, has been Alex Freeland. So let's talk about Alex Freeland in particular. And I'm going to spend a lot of time because he's a fascinating case study into what we want to be able to evaluate. Zone swing percentage. It's very low for Alex Freeland. But is that a bad thing for him in particular? Because when we're talking about baseball, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a different chart for you guys to be able to look at. I think I pulled this up in the most recent one, but I want you guys to be able to see this specific chart. Is there are different areas in which a pitcher can go ahead and throw a baseball. And if we go over, I was already on here. Sweet. I meant to go ahead and cut back to me, but we'll go ahead and do this. There are different areas in which a pitcher can go ahead and attack different hitters across the zone. So imagine this is a strike zone that you see right here. There are several different zones of what you have. So this green kind of outline, we'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer for you guys. These green dots represent the strike zone. This is what the strike zone is. There are 4 different zones as which Baseball Savant highlights it. You have the heart of the zone, which basically means the inner part of the zone. Then you have the shadow zone, which represents both inside the zone and outside the zone. About a ball, I actually don't know the definition of that, but it represents close to around the zone. This is typically where pitchers are trying to hit a lot of their marks because there's a little bit less damage that is had in this area. Then you have the chase zone, this specific area right here in the yellow, and the waste zone. These are outside of the strike zone that pitchers, if they had a choice of when a batter would swing, every single time it would come in the chase and the waste zone because that is a more difficult pitch for batters to be able to go ahead and hit. So that brings up a little bit of a question is what is both Alex Freeland and a lot of these different players doing in this specific part of the zone? And we have different charts for that in particular. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is in the zone contact rates. I'll go ahead and zoom in just a little bit for you guys. It'll be a little bit we'll go ahead and zoom in, and we'll just have to move back and forth for this, just so you guys can go ahead and see. So just to let you guys know some of this, you have heart percentage, you have shadows swing percentage, you have chase percentage, and you have waste percentage for each one of these. So if we're talking about swing percentage, we're going to start on the strike zone, because this is the area, if you were to ask a lot of different people, where does Alex Freeland need to be able to grow? It is at swinging at more strikes, because he is bordering on the line between patience and passivity. So what is Alex Freeland doing specifically in the strike zone? So there's two aspects. There's the heart zone and the shadow zone. Shadow zone includes both balls and strikes right around the border of the strike zone. Heart includes inside the strike zone. What are the numbers for Alex Freeland in this specific zone? He was last year at about 63.5% swing percentage in the heart zone. He's up to 67.5%. And even this is a little bit misleading, because if you look at the first 21 pitches that were put in the heart zone for Alex Freeland in spring training, he swung at them at about a 52.8% clip. The last 25, he swung at 20 of them. That's an 80% clip, which means he's swinging more in the heart of the zone, which means that the 67.4%, that's actually relatively solid, especially with the limited amount of chase that he has, where he does not swing as much in the zone. And this is where you need to be able to watch some of the success that Alex Freeland has comes in the shadow zone. Alex Freeland is only swinging at 31.5% of those specific pitches. I said lower swing percentage for this is good, only because this includes balls, this includes strikes, and if you were to pick a strike to swing at, much more damage can be had in the heart swing percentage as opposed to the shadow swing percentage, which means that if we look at just this overall zone swing percentage for Alex Freeland and say he's only swinging at 57% of the pitches inside of the zone, well, a lot of that comes from the heart part of the zone. He's swinging at 67.5% of those pitches, just a little bit, just about 5% below what the major league average was last year, and it's been increasing throughout spring training. Where he has not swung a whole lot is in the shadow zone. And this is where you can get Alex Freeland, because last year he had a whiff percentage in the shadow zone of about 41%. So far this spring, it's about 33.5%. Also, the exit velos aren't necessarily great in the shadow zone. You can also see exit velos major league average in the heart zone versus the shadow zone, 93 versus 86.5. Much more damage can be had in this part of the zone as opposed to the shadow, which means Alex Freeland, when he's making decisions of when to swing, he's swinging in the heart of the zone, a lot less in the shadow portion of the zone. But that is not where the story is at with Alex Freeland. The story is, if you look at his chase swing percentage and his waist swing percentage, they are both at 0%. And I don't think you guys understand just how insane that is. And this is a post that I put on my Twitter on X yesterday. There have been, up through yesterday, so not including the spring training results yesterday, have been 247 major league players in spring training that have seen at least 30 pitches in the chase or waist zone of pitches. Only 2 of them have not swung at a single pitch outside of that zone. This is the post that I posted yesterday. Alex Freeland has seen 61 chase or waist pitches in spring training. He has swung at 0 of them. I will repeat that. He has swung at 0 of the pitches that pitchers are trying to get them to go ahead and swing at. And out of 247 hitters in spring training, not a small sample size, a very large sample size, 30 chase waist pitches, the only 2 hitters that have swung at 0 of them, Alex Freeland and Jonathan India. That is it. That is the end of the list that you have right here. And then it goes into a little bit of some of the numbers that he go ahead and have for my particular post right here. But he is doing something that is uniquely well, that even if you compare it to some one of the other players with the Dodgers, he's doing a lot better than what they are with specifically some of these zones. Let's look at some of the chase and whiff percentage. Kim with these 33 and 20, again, super small sample size. Santiago Espinal swinging or 21, it was 30 and 20 for Kim. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Santiago Espinal, 21% chase pitches swinging at, 7.7 waste pitches. Nick Senzel, 16.2 chase swing percentage, 0 for the waste pitch. Miguel Rojas swinging at 36% of those. Ryan Fitzgerald, 31%. There's just a lot more of hitters that are going ahead and swinging at these particular pitches, and Freeland is swinging at chase pitches at an elite level. And I think this is one of the things that perhaps is most frustrating with Alex Freeland and his profile is you have a player that exhibits a lot of patience. And it's not always seen with the fundamental results. Next time he comes up on Sportsnet LA, they're probably going to say underneath Alex Freeland, 4 for 27 in spring training, then list the batting average that he has right there. And I don't think that is a fair representation of what he has because some of the underlying metrics say swing decisions are really good for him, particularly at laying off pitches. So then it becomes when should Alex Freeland be able to swing? And what you are starting to see in spring training, especially if you take the first half of spring training and the second half of spring training, is his swing decisions, even though the results have not been good on the field, the swing decisions have actually gotten a lot better over the result of spring training because, as I said, Hart zone swing percentage for Freeland, first half of spring, first 21 plate appearances, about 53%. Second half, it's about 80%, which means this value right here of 60, the value swing percentage of 67.5 is starting to go up for Alex Freeland, which is making the smarter decisions of when to swing the bat, which even if you just use the league average, what is the whiff percentage and what is the exit velo going to be on that? And you even say that Alex Freeland is going to be worse at these two numbers. If you have a whiff percentage anywhere near 14%. League average whiff percentage was 25%. And the exit velo, if you have it anywhere near an exit velo of 93 miles per hour, league average was 89.5. If you only make swing decisions and only swing at that specific aspect of the zone, your results are going to be very, very good as a player. And we're starting to see the underlying metrics to suggest that there are very tangible improvements Freeland has been making so far in spring that are not reflected if you just look at OPS 574 versus 601 OPS, what he had in the regular season. He has 71 WRC plus in spring training. It's not reflected by what any of the swing decision underlying metrics actually go ahead and represent or suggest is actually happening. With Hae-Sung Kim, again, very brief with a lot of his. You're seeing him swing a lot more at the Hart swing percentage. You're also seeing him swing at the shadow zone swing percentage. So it's basically a 75%. If it's inside the strike zone, he's going ahead and swinging at it as much as he possibly can, or anywhere near the strike zone, he's going to go ahead and swing at it. Again, 57.5% swing percentage so far this spring. It also comes with a little bit more chase, which means that you're not going to see a whole lot of walks with Hae-Sung Kim. You're going to be relying a little bit more on the batted ball type of data. Santiago Espinal is a little bit unique, really good numbers. What you're seeing are some tangible improvements with stuff like exit velo. First off, I'll note with Hae-Sung Kim, whiff percentage about the same. With Freeland, it's gone down pretty dramatically, but the exit velos for Kim so far this spring were really solid, about 91, up from his 86 exit velo. For Freeland, it's 89, down 1.7 from his 90.7. With Santiago Espinal, the reason why he's having so much success is he's hitting the ball hard, and much harder than he has in a long time. 93.3 average exit velo for Santiago Espinal, up from his 86.5% that he had last year, swinging a lot more, especially at the heart of the zone, being more aggressive in this specific aspect, and he's doing a lot of damage with that. Hart exit velo at about 96 exit velo for him. A lot of different numbers suggest that he's having a really good spring training so far. Here's some of the other numbers that you can go ahead and see. I'm not going to spend too much time with some of these. Miguel Rojas has been a little bit more aggressive at swinging at a lot of pitches throughout the spring. Let's look at Dalton Rushing because he's another one that's a little bit more fascinating. Swing percentage is exactly around the same. One of the things you're going to notice about Dalton Rushing that is encouraging, his whiff percentage is down pretty dramatically. It's at 30.6 as opposed to what he had last year, which is about 36%. So he's down to about 30.5 from 36 last year. League average is about 25, which even if Dalton Rushing is a little bit above league average, with the way that he has impacted the baseball, I think that impact that he has, you can deal with a little bit of swing and miss if you get the impact that you are looking for Dalton Rushing, which you see that with some of the exit velos for him. Decent enough swing decisions. He's not chasing outside of the zone as much, which is a really good sign for him. It just comes down to the contact percentage and being able to make swing and miss. The contact percentage can be down, but he has to be impacting the baseball, which for Rushing this spring, we have seen him impact the baseball quite a bit. Just looking through, here's some of the other numbers that you can go ahead and see. Another thing, Alex Call having a really good spring. Some of the underlying metrics are actually pretty good, expected results, but he's not hitting the ball too terribly hard this spring. One of the things that you'll notice, a little bit more whiff for Andy Pages this spring. Exit velos are up pretty good for him. Teoscar Hernandez is a little bit concerned. I'll be honest. Even though Teoscar Hernandez has had a good spring, 1,000 OPS, the numbers suggest that he's doing really well. He's still a player that I'm watching because I think some of the underlying metrics last year suggested that there could be some cause for concern. And there's a couple of things that I'm a little bit concerned about, particularly with some of the in-game power that we're seeing with Teoscar Hernandez this spring. And also, he is swinging and missing a lot in spring training. It's a 40% whiff percentage in Teoscar Hernandez. Again, just 105 pitches. You have to take these with a little bit of grain of salt, but he's swinging and missing quite a bit this spring. Some of the, even just swinging and missing at the heart of the zone. It's a 31.5% whiff percentage in the heart of the zone, which means pitchers can go ahead and attack him, and they don't have to get him to chase to go ahead and swing and miss. He's somebody, though, even though the overall results are pretty good, some of the underlying metrics are a little bit concerning for me with Teoscar Hernandez. And then some of the other metrics that we can go ahead and see down there, we won't go ahead and do that. Another aspect that you can go ahead and look at is different type of pitch and how well a player is doing with different types of pitches. And these are grouped into a couple of different categories. It is grouped into fastball, off speed, and breaking ball. Those are very loose categories defined by Baseball Savant. I'll actually go ahead and show you that right here, just so you can go ahead and see where some of these results are. Again, I look at this stuff every single day. If you go to Baseball Savant, a couple of different categories that we have right here. Fastball, sinker, cutter is included in that category. Then you have different off-speed pitches and breaking pitches. You can go ahead and look at individual results through these specific categories right here. And what I wanted to be able to look at is how are players doing and where could perhaps tangible improvements be seen by the different pitch type. So it's not just location, but could also pitchers just spam a specific type of pitch and get a batter out with relative ease. So typically across Major League Baseball, fastballs are hit the hardest and swing and miss at the least. It's where you get to the off speed and the breaking stuff where, yes, there can be more damage that can be had, but there's a little bit more swing and miss that pitchers can go ahead and get, and which is why you're seeing a much more increase in swing in off speed and breaking pitches thrown in the game of baseball. It's because teams want pitchers to throw the best pitch that they possibly can. So when looking at some of these results, a couple of different things that you would notice about especially with guys like an Alex Freeland. Off-speed pitches, haven't seen a whole lot. He really is not swinging a whole lot at breaking and off-speed pitches, which is actually probably a good and a strategy that he's intentionally trying to implement in his game, because last year with Alex Freeland, he whiffed at about 58% of off-speed pitches and about 44% of breaking ball pitches. What is he doing so far this spring? It's about 33% and 0% respectively. A lot less whiff, although to be fair, that comes from 6 and 7 swings respectively. So he's swinging, when he is swinging, it's almost all fastball that Alex Freeland is going ahead and swinging at, and that's where he's getting a lot of his damage offensively with the exit velos. Looking at a player like Hae-Sung Kim, it kind of is swing at just about everything. Doesn't matter, fastball about 60%, off speed 56%, breaking 56% as well. You saw some troubles that he had, especially with off-speed stuff. Breaking stuff is also able to get him. But with spring training, had a good couple of exit velos with some of those pitches. So we'll go ahead and move off of some of that results. Though exit velos, very good. Still some swing and miss that you can see with some of those pitches in particular. Santiago Espinal, what you're seeing with him, again, very similar swing decisions on different type of pitches. But what you're seeing is exit velos across the board being much higher, around 92 to 93 for each and every single type of pitch that he's going ahead and getting. And this is what you can see. Let's go ahead and go to Dalton Rushing, just because I think these are some of the important players to be able to watch. You're seeing Dalton Rushing, fastball whiff percentage, off-speed whiff percentage, and breaking ball whiff percentage go down throughout the course of spring training. Really good indicators, perhaps, that he's seeing the ball a little bit better, and there's hopefully will be a little bit less whiff in his game, which you pair that to his overall whiff percentage going down. That is a very good sign for a Dalton Rushing. Just hear some of the other results. I don't want to spend too much time on this specific aspect because I think there's other aspects that perhaps could be more intriguing. And this is where we get into a little bit some of the fun stuff that we can go ahead and dive into, because with the results that we go ahead and see, you can look at the actual on-field results that his player actually gets. Player is batting 300 with a 350 on base percentage and a 410 slugging percentage, and be able to make a determination. What is not easily accessible is the expected results that a player has. Now, in the regular season, what typically we like to do is we like to make a comparison. This is what his batting average is, but this is what his expected batting average is. Expected batting average, for those of you who are not aware, takes into account launch angle and takes into account exit velo to make a determination as to this is what this player should be hitting at the major league level. This is what a player, given the actual results, should be hitting. Instead of what the actual results say, perhaps, and the example that I used earlier, 110 mile per hour line drive that gets caught by the shortstop who's in the right position versus a 64 mile per hour bloop that somehow is able to get in between all the different hitters. Well, the one that is hit 110 miles per hour is the better hit baseball. And if you ask the player, those are the types of hits that he's wanting to get, because over the long scale expected duration of many different games at 162 game sample, 110 mile per hour hits are going to be hits a lot more than the 62 mile per hour bloop that goes ahead and lands in between all the different defenders. So expected batting average takes into account exit velo and launch angle. You can look at expected on base percentage and expected slugging percentage. We can use these and make a comparison in what their expected results are versus their actual results. And you see this when you go to any individual StatCast page for a regular season. And so if we look at a player, let's go ahead and look at Shohei Ohtani, only because he is the face of Major League Baseball. When you look at his page, when you look at his baseball savant, what you notice is not batting average, not slugging percentage, not on base percentage. You see expected results. So you see Shohei Ohtani last year batted 282. His expected batting average was 272. Really good for him. His expected slugging was 694. Very close, in line with what his actual slugging percentage is. The results that you see in this table that a lot of people like to refer to includes expected results as a part of the evaluation to determine how good a player is, and that's what you put a lot of your focus in. And here's the issue when you look at individual players. So, for example, let's say that we look at Dalton Rushing and we look at what some of his numbers actually are, and we want to be able to see, okay, how well is he actually doing with his expected batting average, expected slugging, so on and so forth. For spring training, weirdly enough, those values aren't being able to be found on baseball, on Fangraphs, which means that a lot of people just ignore that aspect, when in reality, you want to use that aspect to be able to compare and say, hey, this player could be better than what the results are actually showing. And so there is a thought process that those results can't be found. But in reality, you just have to do a little bit of work, and you can get a triple slash line, an expected triple slash line that can represent, given the quality of contact, how good of a player it is. And this can be found in baseball a reference. So for example, let's go ahead and look at Dalton Rushing. And the reason why this is important is if you look at the overall results with Dalton Rushing, you'll see he's batting 200, 250 on base percentage, 440 slugging, at 68 WRC plus. And you make a determination, hey, Dalton Rushing is not hitting that good in spring training. But then you look at what the actual results are, and you can actually get the results. So through Baseball Savant, this is through the search feature that you have right here. There are a couple of different things that I have right here. All the different options of results that could go ahead and happen on the field. Spring training 2026. View it through the lens of a pitcher. But what you can do is you can include stats. And you can include stats like expected batting average and expected slugging percentage, as well as exit velo, projected distance, launch angle. And look at what you can find on Baseball Savant. Is expected batting average and expected slugging of each individual result that you are seeing for Dalton Rushing. And this is important because there was a stretch that Dalton Rushing had as far as on the field results that were absolutely spectacular for him. Look at this stretch that he had right here. I'm going to include a couple of additional results from a game that didn't technically count as part of this. Exit velos for Dalton Rushing during a couple of game stretch in which he had batted balls. 106.5, 109, 112, 107, 103. You also throw in a 107 and 102 exit velos in the exhibition game against Mexico that is not included in this. And you're talking about 7 batted balls in a row that were 100 mile per hour plus for Dalton Rushing that had really, really good expected numbers. Not completely reflected in what the actual results are. So, how do I rectify this? Because what I want is I want the expected batting average. I want the expected on base percentage. I want the expected slugging. Luckily for you guys, I have a obsession with going ahead and diving into some of the numbers to be able to get to some of these results. So this is what I did. We'll go ahead and move over to Dalton Rushing only because we highlighted him. Is I have each one of the results actually go ahead and input it into my spreadsheet with numbers that are actually calculating what the expected batting average, on base percentage, slugging percentage actually are. These numbers come directly from the Baseball Savant search that I did to be able to calculate these as best as I possibly could with some of the results. And you can see each one of his plate appearance in spring training calculated right here. It goes into one of these columns that you can see right here, or each one of these tabs. And these are what the results are, including the actual on-field results that you see for a player, as well as the expected results. And let's go ahead and highlight Dalton Rushing in particular, because batting average 220, 250 on base percentage, 440 slugging, that is a 690 OPS. However, what is his expected results on the field? His expected batting average, 277, 334, with an expected slugging of 559. That's an 893 OPS expected for Dalton Rushing this spring training, which means that if we were to look past what the on-field results say and look at what the underlying metrics are telling us, we are seeing that Dalton Rushing is having a really good spring training, especially with his impact on the baseball, which he's had a 283 expected ISO. He's done really well impacting baseball this spring training, hitting the ball hard, about 92.5% average exit velo, well above the 89.5 exit velo that it was last year. As far as impacting the baseball, Dalton Rushing has about a 200-point difference between what his actual OPS and what his expected OPS is. And this is important because if we are talking about predicting long-term results, it is my theory. Perhaps you could have a little bit of a difference of opinion. It is my theory that the expected numbers are much more predictive of what is going to happen long-term versus what the actual on-field results in spring training are. Meaning, I want players to have those 110 mile per hour line drives as opposed to bloop singles that go ahead and fall in there and you're able to get some good numbers on the spring training chart, but that aren't going to help you long-term in the actual result of the regular season. So, where are some of the differences that we can go ahead and see in spring training with some of these players? Let's go ahead and start off with the top, and let's start off with Alex Freeland. And I want to be able to highlight this. First off, I got to give a shout out to Dodger Blue, Jeff Spiegel, and the guys. They actually took a lot of the information that I had, posted a lot of this on my X on Twitter, and they were able to highlight this on the show because there is a dramatic difference between the on-field results in Alex Freeland and what you are going ahead and seeing with the results that are showing on the field. Because on the field, he's only batting 148. This will be a statistic that you see next time he comes up to the plate in spring training. 4 for 27, 148 batting average, 351 on base percentage, 222 slugging. That is 574 OPS for Alex Freeland. However, if you look at the expected results for Freeland, his expected results overall for both righties and lefties are 245, 425, and a 416, which means his expected OPS is 840, which is about 250 points higher than what his actual results are, which means you have to take an argument of what do you believe more for Alex Freeland? Do you believe that he's closer to a 575 OPS hitter, or do you think with the underlying metrics he's perhaps closer to an 840? Or perhaps is a little bit in between, which is probably the answer of what you were looking for. A couple of other metrics: 175 batting average on balls in play for Alex Freeland so far this spring. He has not been lucky with a lot of the batted ball that he has. You look at some of the batted balls that we've seen. There was a double that he had that was really well. Ground out, 291 expected batting average. A fly out in San Francisco that would have been a home run in 26 out of 30 ballparks. A double that would have been a home run in 25 out of 30 different ballparks. 289 average on a line out, 503 expected batting average on a force out, a 551 expected batting average on a ground out, and another ground out, 263 expected batting average for him. Again, a lot of these underlying metrics for Alex Freeland certainly is going to be impacted by his ability to get on base, and you can very well make an argument that he's not going to see as many pitches that are going to be outside the strike zone. But again, this goes back to what are some of the numbers that he's put up in zone and swing decisions, because if he is not swinging outside of the zone and he's the 9-hitter and pitchers are worried about going ahead and pitching to Shohei Ohtani, you are starting to see some of the in-zone swing decisions start to go up and some of the whiff start to go down, which means that if he is getting pitches exclusively in the heart of the zone that he is swinging at, he's going to do a lot more damage than I think what people are expecting. That is what the underlying metrics show for Alex Freeland. This is in major contrast with what we've seen, again, with just 13 plate appearances for Ha-Seong Kim. It was a 1.15 OPS for Ha-Seong Kim and a 579 expected OPS based on the results that he had with a 38.5% strikeout percentage and a 750 batting average in balls in play. I think a lot of people, and the reason why this is so important is because a lot of people, I believe, have made up their mind. Ha-Seong Kim versus Alex Freeland on the roster. And we'll get into some of the other arguments for Ha-Seong Kim in particular, because I'll try my best to be able to give you the pro Ha-Seong Kim argument. But a lot of people have already made a determination. They prefer Ha-Seong Kim over Alex Freeland. But a lot of people have not considered some of the ramifications that adding Ha-Seong Kim on the roster would have and what some of the potential improvements that you're looking to be able to see Ha-Seong Kim be able to make throughout the course of the regular season. I think there is an expectation that, he's hitting 462 in spring training. He automatically is going to be able to do that at the big leagues when there is big warning signs that the contact percentage has not gone up. Very small sample size, but even if you take into account some of the WBC, he had the home run, 1 for 10 the rest of the way. This is not intended to be able to diminish the value of Ha-Seong Kim, but rather to provide a contrast as to when these two dramatic differences conflict with each other, particularly in a battle for spring training. What do you trust more? Do you trust what the on-field results actually say? Meaning Ha-Seong Kim had a 1.154 OPS in spring training, and Alex Freeland, his spring training OPS is worse than what his regular season OPS was. Do you look at that and put more weight into that? Or do you put more weight into what the expected results are, which are based more in exit velo, based more in launch angle, and pair that with some of the swing decision metrics, meaning you look, instead of OPS, WRC+, batting average, strikeout percentage, you instead look at exit velos. Instead you look at expected OPS. Instead you look at swing decisions type of basis. What do we put more basis on? Because that is going to help determine who gets the roster spot at second base for the Los Angeles Dodgers. There could not be a more clear contrast and difference into profiles and approach that you have between the two players, between the very patient, sometimes passive Alex Freeland and the heavy swinging Ha-Seong Kim. Both are great defenders. Both need experience at the major league level. Who has earned it for you at the major league level is a real question. And what basis do you put that earning at the major league level on? Do you put it on the on-field results? Do you put it on the expected results? Or do you go back to the regular season? The reason why I question whether we should go back to the regular season is if you look at some of the underlying metrics during the regular season, both are in pretty much the exact same place with a lot of their underlying metrics, both with strikeout rate, both with the expected weighted on base average. There's a lot of things that say both of them are around the same place, even though Kim, 95 WRC plus on the season versus a 73. You look underneath the hood, there's reason to say perhaps that probably is not going to go ahead and continue for Ha-Seong Kim going forward. There's reasons why you have speculation as to whether Alex Freeland could be a successful major league player going forward. What do you put more stock in when there is a spring training battle and when you want to be able to see there be competition between the two? Do you look at the actual on-field results, which if you just solely look at that, you say Ha-Seong Kim is the player that you want to be on the roster, and Alex Freeland, definitely don't want him. He's got a lot more work when he has to do. When a lot of underlying metrics suggest that perhaps Alex Freeland is the one that has earned a roster spot, and it's counterintuitive to what we actually think. Going into some of the other players, for example, Santiago Espinal. He has a 1.326 OPS. That is not just a product of getting lucky on the field. He's got a near 1,000 OPS, expected OPS for him on the season. He's not whiffing a whole lot. He's hitting the baseball a lot harder. He's hitting for power, which is something that you would not expect from a player like Espinal. Espinal is not fighting for the same roster spot that Freeland and Kim are. Freeland and Kim, left-handed hitting infielder, they're fighting for a roster spot. Espinal is going to make the roster for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and it comes primarily from his past ability to be able to hit against left-handed pitching. But there's something a little bit weird with some of his spring training stats, and perhaps this is when you could get into a little bit of a different argument if you buy into some of the spring training stats, because if we are to look at stats against left-handed pitching for Santiago Espinal, where you would expect a lot of damage to be able to come, Santiago Espinal is hitting 444 with a 1.01 OPS against left-handed pitching, but his expected OPS against left-handed pitching is 480. That is not good at all. That is really bad expected OPS. Comes from just 11 plate appearances for Santiago Espinal. Actually, where Espinal is getting a majority of his damage, which this is so bizarre with some of the numbers because this is not the thing that you would expect out of Espinal, is his expected OPS against right-handed pitching is 1.3 with an actual OPS of 1.526. Espinal is hammering right-handed pitching right now, which with the role that you would expect for Santiago Espinal, you would expect more of a platoon position, perhaps with a Max Muncy at third base to be able to help fill in the role for Tommy Edman. But he's actually doing a little bit of the inverse. While the actual on-field results say good versus lefties, great versus righties, the actual advanced metrics say great against righties, not good against lefties, although very small sample size, just 11 plate appearances. You know somebody who's actually done really well against left-handed pitching? Nick Senzel. Nick Senzel, 1.584 OPS against lefties and a 1.179 expected OPS. Again, just 11 plate appearances for him against lefties. Very high walk percentage, won't necessarily continue, but he's done really well against lefties. This is not something that I would anticipate the organization to do, but if you were to just make a decision as to, we're going to make a decision in spring training, and we need a guy who's good against righties and a guy who's good against lefties, the really weird underlying metrics with spring training perhaps would suggest get Nick Senzel to be that platoon option to hit against right-handed pitching, and then get Santiago Espinal to hit, or Senzel to hit against lefties, Santiago Espinal to hit against righties. I do not expect that to be the case. I still expect Espinal to be primarily a hitter against left-handed pitching, even though some of the underlying metrics suggest batted ball data in 11 plate appearances hasn't necessarily been great. Just a weird underlying result of what we're seeing. Overall, big picture though, the actual on-field results of what we're seeing with Espinal is not masked by what we're seeing behind the scenes, which means that Espinal is swinging the bat as well as he has in a long time. You can have a lot of speculation about him going forward as to whether this is going to translate into the major league scene onto the MLB level. But based on what he's doing, especially because he had to fight and earn a spot onto the major league roster, expected results following right on line with what the actual results are actually showing us. Senzel, mostly against left-handed pitching is when the damage is actually coming. Miguel Rojas, he's got an 850 OPS, just a 655 expected OPS, a little bit worse than what was expected. Same thing with Fitzgerald. Dalton Rushing, we had already talked about the results. Again, overall expected results, really good. Against righties is when you're seeing Dalton Rushing absolutely hammer pitching right now. 1.039 expected OPS with the near 95.5% average exit velo against righties, and expected near 310 expected batting average. Insane with what he's been able to do against righties. Brian Ward, frankly, has struggled in spring training. Underlying metrics suggest it. The overall results suggest it for him. Michael Ciani, he's had a good expected on base percentage. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of impact with the baseball. With Ciani, you're looking at somebody who would be more of a defensive first type of guy. Alex Call, again, when you're talking about guys fighting for a roster spot, while Alex Call, I think, is the heavy favorite to be able to make this roster out of spring training, he's still somebody to be able to look out for. He's batting .467, 600 on base percentage, .733 slug, 1.333 OPS. The overall underlying metrics are worse than that, but he's still hitting pretty well. .853 expected OPS for Alex Call. A couple of other names that are a little bit noteworthy. Teoscar Hernandez, not great expected OPS, around 700, which is what he was during the regular season last year, or he was about 720 last year during the regular season. Again, there are some concerns with some of the swinging miss that I'm seeing with a Teoscar Hernandez. A couple of other guys, Zach Earhart, James Tibbs, having good springs on the field results, close to 900 OPS. James Tibbs, a little bit better, some of the metrics, particularly with some of the power that James Tibbs has had. There just hasn't been as much impact on the baseball with Zach Earhart. You would want to see a little bit more power with some of the metrics that Zach Earhart would have in spring training. The player that perhaps is going under the radar, and I think he's having a good spring training, but man, the impact on the baseball that Noah Miller has had has been surprising to me, very much so, because Noah Miller, when you look at the profile of player that he is a defensive first, very much defensive first infielder who has a glove that could be close to a 60 to 70 type of grade glove. It is a tremendous glove that Noah Miller has on the field. And he's hit well in spring training. He's batting .300, .400 with an .867 OPS. But the thing about Noah Miller is you don't expect a whole lot from the bat. Well, we're seeing quite a bit with the bat with Noah Miller. Not only the exit velo is around 92, pretty solid for Noah Miller. His expected batting average is .311, right aligned with what the actual result is. Expected on base percentage, .409, right along with what the actual results are. 532 expected slugging, higher than what the actual results are, which means that he's actually performing a lot better than what the actual results are showing. You go to some of the metrics and some of the in-game results that you can see for Noah Miller. Look at all these aspects where you're seeing really solid results for Noah Miller on the field. The stretch right here where he had a really good run, which also includes a lot of these numbers down here. Noah Miller has been outstanding on the field. Just going in through some of the metrics, righties versus lefties, just a couple of things I want to highlight. Freeland hitting better again, at least the expected results against righties than he is against lefties. If you're talking about particular aspects where Alex Freeland probably needs to work on, it would be against left-handed pitching. Although, if you're talking about the role at the major league level, it is specifically a role against right-handed pitching that potentially could be open for him, and you're seeing some pretty solid results. Expected OPS against righties for him. Again, I already talked about Espinal and Senzel with some of the results. Talked a little bit about Dalton Rushing. Noah Miller's hammering against right-handed pitching. Same thing with Zaire Hope, who's been hammering against right-handed pitching as well. Some of the guys that perhaps could be struggling, Ryan Ward has been struggling with his OPS, expected OPS against righties. Another guy, very high on him. The on-field results are good against righties, but one thing to watch, because this could be something that the Dodgers, if you're talking about things perhaps in the future, perhaps looking potentially more trade deadline that they could look to, Andy Pages only has a 582 expected OPS against right-handed pitching. And that doesn't pair well with your fourth outfielder being another right-handed batter that you see long-term being a much better hitter against left-handed pitching going forward. Just a thing to keep an eye out for. Andy Pages hasn't impacted the ball quite as well against righties as he has against lefties, which lefties Andy Pages is absolutely hammering at this point. Same thing with Alex Call, hammering left-handed pitching as well, and James Tibbs absolutely hammering left-handed pitching. These are a lot of different numbers to be able to mull over, and you guys have the luxury to be able to take the time to be able to mull these over for yourself. I have put the link to this Excel spreadsheet in the description of this video, as well as the overall in the chat as well. Pin that to the top. Please look at this. This will be updated for you guys daily as best as I possibly can. Here's a couple of reasons why I think it's important and so essential to be able to go through this. One, splits, you can't find that anywhere else. You have to actually manually pull these statistics in order to be able to find splits, whether you're looking for the on-field results or whether you're just looking for some of the expected results. I was able to pull a lot of these numbers, actually get expected results for you guys to be able to go ahead and mull over, because expected results and swing decisions are an underutilized tool when going ahead and evaluating players for spring training. And when we're talking about predictive statistics, I believe those are much better indicators of how a player is going to do going forward in spring, or going forward in the regular season from spring training. And while spring training has a lot of different variants in results, variants in types of pitchers that they're playing, variance and it being just a small sample size to where results vary very dramatically, going on a per pitch basis, which has a larger sample size, which is able to give you insight into the approach that a player is actually having, as well as different exit velos. How well is this guy actually making impact on the baseball, and what is the expected results, even if the on-field results don't necessarily show a similar result. Those aspects, I think, are much more indicative, or at least partially more indicative of what a player is going to do during the regular season, to the point where if we're talking about evaluating players and what they're going to do in 2026, and if you had to make a decision of who would make the big league roster and I only had the information of spring training stats, you look at the expected data, you look at swing decisions, you look for tangible improvements player has made, and if there are real improvements that a player has made in those aspects, the on-field results of spring training matter less to me, and the other aspects matter more. And I think the coverage that we are giving for spring training stats is exclusively on the on-field results as opposed to the underlying, let's actually dive deeper into swing decisions, let's dive deeper into the expected results, let's dive deeper into what the underlying fundamentals of what this player is actually doing showcase us on the field. And I think if we do a little bit better job of being able to highlight those numbers and be able to dive into those, I think we'll have a little bit of a better insight into perhaps how an organization or perhaps other organizations are viewing these players. Now, this is not the only insight that you have on players, because as it is a little bit, and this is going very statistical, as it is in a little bit more of a Bayesian approach, where you start off with some sort of theory or some sort of prior knowledge that you have. There is prior knowledge on some of these guys, and spring training data is only going to move the prior knowledge a certain degree. So then it becomes a question of how much prior knowledge do we have on individual players, and what do we use with some of that prior knowledge to be able to make conclusions. And then again, I keep going back to the Freeland versus Kim type of conversation. And the reason why I keep going back into that type of conversation is not because I want desperately for Freeland to make the roster over Kim. It is I want desperately for the Los Angeles Dodgers to make the best choice for who should make it onto the major league roster. And I think if we just solely base the decision on the on-field results in spring training, or perhaps the WRC plus comparison that we see from 2025, when some of the underlying metrics are concerning for very much for both players, it might not be the right choice for the Los Angeles Dodgers to have. And I think people have already made a determination Ha-Seong Kim is going to make the Los Angeles Dodgers roster, when the underlying metrics suggest that if you were to look at that, especially in spring training, and especially with tangible improvements, Freeland has made a lot of improvements that have gone completely under the radar and completely unnoticed. So this brings up a question. Who should make the roster? Alex Freeland or Ha-Seong Kim? Now, I've made a lot of very real arguments for Alex Freeland to be able to make the roster. One, swing decisions have gotten better. He's not swinging outside of the zone, not just at a good basis, but at an elite basis, while also throughout spring training increasing his heart zone swing percentage. He's forcing pitchers to go ahead and execute to a maximum degree, and it is only a matter of time. You look at his batting average and balls in play and his expected stats, that he is going to go ahead and be a much better hitter, and the results are going to follow with Alex Freeland. I believe that is to be the case if he continues with the same approach. If he has this approach, he's maximizing out on the approach that you could possibly have, and having not just a good approach, one of the best approaches in Major League Baseball. Then you look at Ha-Seong Kim. What is the argument for Ha-Seong Kim? The argument that you could make for Ha-Seong Kim is if you wanted to look perhaps at some of the numbers last year, the 95 WRC plus was able to play better than Alex Freeland 73 WRC plus on the field, if you want to use that prior knowledge. If you want to talk about his speed, the impact that has on the game of field. If you like his defense a little bit better than Alex Freeland, although I think both of them are really quality defenders, I would anticipate Ha-Seong Kim, especially at second base, to be a little bit of a better defender. And then that throws in the wild card that we've talked a lot about this spring, and that is center field. Now, this is a difficult aspect to be able to base a lot of your conclusion on, because if it was a tiebreaker between Alex Freeland and Ha-Seong Kim, perhaps you could give the tiebreaker with Ha-Seong Kim because he, quote-unquote, has the ability to play center field. Here's where this becomes a little bit of a question, because he did not play center field a ton last year, and I believe played in one spring training game, if I'm not mistaken, at center field before going off to the WBC. I get it. There is a lot of concern about backup in center field for the Los Angeles Dodgers. You have Alex Call, who's only, I believe, played one spring training game in center field, has played center field in the past in his career and could fill in a pinch and be able to play center field. But perhaps you want somebody with just a little bit additional insurance in the outfield, because if you have Espinal and you go ahead and have Freeland, there's not a whole lot of backup or insurance in the outfield. Espinal, a little bit of experience in the outfield, could fill in the corners if needed, but that brings into a little bit of question mark of some of the depth that you would have. But there also becomes a question of how comfortable do you feel with Hae-Sung Kim in center field, especially with maybe one game played throughout the spring and center field. Do you feel comfortable with him being able to go ahead and throw out there in center field? If that is what your tiebreaker is, I feel comfortable enough with him being able to be backup or at least be ultra insurance in center field. But ultimately, I think this comes back to a theoretical question, a couple of theoretical questions. One, did Alex Freeland and Hae-Sung Kim both start off at the same exact starting point? Meaning, if you're starting off with a race, let's use the image of both Freeland and Kim are having a race to be able to see who actually is going to win the second base job. Are they both starting off at the exact same spot? Or is Hae-Sung Kim a couple of steps ahead of you and Alex Freeland, meaning Alex Freeland has to show more than what Hae-Sung Kim is actually showing to be able to overtake him in the race to be able to win the job at second base? Is that where your case is at, or are they starting off at near identical type of spots? For me, they start off at pretty identical type of spots, only because a lot of the underlying metrics suggest that both of them really struggle, and both of them really struggle to swing and miss. You could have a little bit of a different starting point for both of them, which would help determine how much weight you have into the spring training results, and perhaps how much a certain player moved forward or moved backwards. And then also a theoretical question for us examining and looking at spring training results is, what do you base spring training results on? Do you look at the underlying metrics for what a player actually has, or do you throw those out, or do you just look at the overall on-field results? Because this is a philosophical question. If both players are very close to each other, if both players are very similar to each other, and we have to evaluate the offense, which one is going to be the better player? Which metrics do you look at? Which metrics do you dive deep into to try to make the best decision of who should make the roster for the Los Angeles Dodgers? And it is my opinion that we as a community, baseball community, are not diving deep enough into the numbers. Yes, they are inconsistent. Yes, they could perhaps not be as informative as some of the prior numbers, and the large focus should be on that prior. But when there's a little bit of wiggle room, and when there's a battle for spring training results to actually happen, which emphasis do we put on? The underlying metrics or the on-field results? The swing decisions, or what is the player's OPS, the batting average, so on and so forth? I think both are useful, but if you had to weigh something more and predict what is going to be more impactful for the regular season, it is my evaluation you should use the underlying metrics. And I think we are not even examining that at all and making a determination based on what's on the field. Still important, still matters, especially with confidence type of level. But I think we need to do a better job of being able to examine both. That is my determination. Curious as to some of your guys' thoughts with this in the comment section. I want to be able to interact with you, some of the thoughts that you have, perhaps some of the flaws that you saw with some of my arguments. It is a long show that we had today. It is a very detailed type of oriented show, but I think it is one that is important, not because we are dealing with Hae-Sung Kim and Alex Freeland, because you can throw those names out and you can look at 5 years, 10 years down into the future, next year even, and look at different position battles, and you're dealing with a lot of the exact same questions. And there's questions not just with the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have the luxury of having the best talent in the game of baseball on their team, but there are questions with other organizations. And if you have this exact same dichotomy and you're looking for multiple different position battles, what do you base your roster determination? How do you determine who gets the roster spot? And also, when you're talking about each one of these players, how do you go ahead and give instruction as to what player needs to work on? Because with players at the minor league level, it's not just, just go ahead and do your thing out there. No, there are very specific things that players are working on. And with a player like I've used throughout this entire example, like Alex Freeland, there have been very specific things that he has been working on and has been on a more swing decision type of basis. And let's be honest, he's maxing out on a swing decision type of basis, which means that, let's say Hae-Sung Kim wins the roster battle, which if I had to guess, it's probably going to be Hae-Sung Kim that wins the roster battle in spring training. What do you tell Alex Freeland to work on specifically when it comes to that basis? Do you say, hey, we need you to work on a little bit of your whiff in the shadow zone when you do swing at the shadow zone, or don't swing at the shadow zone at all? Or we need you to become a little bit better as a right-handed hitter. What sort of questions, what sort of things do you have to work on? And this is not just for him in particular. If you make the inverse decision with Ha-Seong Kim, what are some of the things that you ask them in particular? All of this is difficult. All of this is challenging. It should be challenging because there is a battle, and there is, despite what the overall, you can look at the on-field results actually say, I believe this battle is still going on for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I think if you dive a little bit deeper into some of the numbers, perhaps you could get better, more insightful insight into what the organization is looking at, because they're looking at things a lot more deeper than just what is shown on MLB.com or Fangraphs. That's going to do it for the show here today. It's been a privilege to be able to interact with you guys. Curious as to some of your thoughts. Please leave comments down in the comment section. I want to be able to interact with you. I want to be able to help incite you. If you have questions about this data set, perhaps questions about how I got any of this information, please leave that down. Please let me know in that comment. Also, keep an eye out for some of these spreadsheets, or keep a tab with this spreadsheet on, because I'm going to be updating this as often as I possibly can. Try to do it daily. There's a lot of different players. So, for example, if you're curious about how Zaire Hope and Josue DePaula are looking with some of their metrics in spring training, we're going to have that in here with some of the, I think there's 17 different players that I have right here. Very insightful stuff for you to be able to have. Privileged to be able to do this show for you guys. Until next time they were able to do this, which still trying to work out with Casey when the next time we're going to be able to do it. Tomorrow and Friday, there are evening games, which impacts potentially when we're going to be able to do a show, only because we will not go and interfere with the Dodgers game. That's just a policy that Casey and I have. Dodgers Daily. We want you guys to watch that and not watch Dodgers Daily. Just an approach that we have, philosophy that we have. Until next time, though, thank you for tuning in. God bless, and go Dodgers.